So, Sean, remember Churchill's famous phrase about the beginning and the end? Well, apparently Israeli forces are being withdrawn from Gaza, and some people are surmising this might be the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it's the end of the beginning or beginning of the end, that classic quote. A lot of commentators have talked about the Israeli forces coming out as being a sort of significant step because America's thought that this war would be over, at least the military part, by Christmas, and maybe applying pressure behind the scenes, particularly since I think it's just over 500 Israeli soldiers have died so far in this conflict, about 172 since the ground offensive started. And of course, that's just the dead. There'll be loads more that are injured. They'll be licking their wounds. Unfortunately, I have to say, I don't think that's the case at all. I think when we did operations in Afghanistan for many years, you'd have 4-month tours of duty. And then at the end of that, your people were weary. They were tired. They needed to be rotated out. So you'd pull them out after 4 months. They'd have 4 months rest, then 4 months retraining, and then they would redeploy. And somewhere in there, you've got to have people to do the training. So you can only really deploy sustainably about a quarter of your force. I understand that Israel mobilized about 350,000. And I understand that they put quite a lot of those into the Gaza. And we're now into the 4th month. 7th of October, November, December, we're starting the 4th month. And it's no great surprise that they're going to need to rotate people through, give them a rest. It's incredibly tense, the fighting and the environment. So almost certainly that's not marking the beginning of the end at all.
Just business as usual, really.
I think so. And what's a bit disturbing is you start looking at what next, because if you look at some of the statistics, so I was disturbed the other day looking at, remember in the Northern Ireland and we had the Troubles and we were bombed in London occasionally. And I remember talking to some Americans going, how could you live in London with all that bombing going on? You went, there's only 1 or 2 bombs that went off. But on the media, it looked like the whole of London. My point being is that Gaza, the danger is you see all this stuff leveled and you think, is that the whole of Gaza? And it's not. But it turns out that about 30% of Gaza has now been leveled. And if you look at the Second World War, Germany was devastated in the Second World War by the end of it. It had lost 10% of its infrastructure by the end of the war, and it needed massive work to get it rebuilt. Gaza's already 30% been destroyed, and Israel's not finished yet. So I think this could be very difficult. Israeli politics is now talking about this being a long war. They're talking about potentially another year of the conflict. So if you look at it from a military perspective, they clearly have yet to finish fighting above ground, and then they've got the challenge of below ground, and then they've got to somehow consolidate into the future. So I think it's going to be a very, very difficult year, and goodness knows how America is going to manage this, because behind closed doors, I'd imagine President Biden is furious that Israel is acting like it's been given a blank check here. Casualty figures continue to rise. The humanitarian situation, despite the UN Security Council resolution, has not been resolved, and the fighting continues.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Sean, because if we assume at some stage Hamas is going to run out of fighters, of its weapons reserve, if we, the Houthis we know now are involved, their stocks go and they've got nothing more to offer. Iran, for whom I think this is still a proxy war, are still there wanting to fight. They don't have the arms to fight with. What's Iran going to do next?
Yeah, I think they're all loosely related, aren't they? So the one common factor, as you say, is Iran is funding Hezbollah, that's based in Lebanon up to the north, that's fighting every day. We're not hearing much about it. Lots of cross-border skirmishes. It's funding Hamas, that we are hearing a lot about, and it's also funding the Houthis out of the Yemen. I think what's the difficulty is that there's been a lot of talk about maybe Hezbollah ramping up its game and a major conflict happening there. But two reasons why that's probably not going to happen, even though Nasrallah, the leader there, probably does want it to happen, is that Lebanon, last time there was a major war, got badly pummeled, and the people of Lebanon do not want that to happen again. So there would be no support for an escalation. They're happy for a calibrated response, but not for an escalation. And also for the fighters of Hezbollah, there's apparently 25,000 of them. But if you look at that, that's less than 10% of the size of the Israeli forces. And actually, that's the tip of the iceberg, because Israel has a fully functioning air force, a fully functioning navy, a fully functioning army, space assets, the rest. It would not end well for Hezbollah. I think going back to your point about Hamas, though, the last figures I saw, they were talking about 7,000 Hamas fighters had been killed. Conservative estimates put the number at 25,000 that had been around. Yahya Sinwar, who's the head of them, is still alive and kicking by all accounts. And if it's taken 3 months or so of fighting to drop Hamas by 7,000 fighters, you extrapolate the maths, you've got another 6 months of fighting to be able to sort the rest out. And bluntly, they're not going to run out of weapons, because Iran will continue to provide weapons. It's more difficult to get them into the country, but I'm convinced that there will be ways of them doing that. So, yeah, it's difficult. The dark shadow of Iran is behind a lot of this, but it'd be quite difficult to see how that will be resolved without a direct strike against Iran. And for all sorts of reasons, the West will be reluctant to see it escalate like that.